Hello and welcome to an international edition of Bloke on the Range. My French cousin Jean-Claude Mec and his friend Jean-François Jatapatique have kindly agreed to do a video for us on French 8mm revolvers. Now, Jean-Claude is full of Gallic pride, and also a bit of garlic pride. He can be somewhat whiffy at times, and he can be a little bit sensitive. Like with the Germans, it helps if you don't mention the war. Problem is, there's quite a lot of wars we're not supposed to mention. He's not only sore about Dunkirk and the British sinking of the French fleet at Mers el-Kébir in 1940, but also Waterloo, the Hundred Years' War, Agincourt, Crécy, and even the sinking of the Rainbow Warrior, which was supposed to be a French victory. For him, the Entente Cordiale is a short aberration after millennia of Anglo-French hostilities, and he just can't wait to get back to it. Now you might notice a slight family resemblance. You wouldn't be the first. The genes flow very strong in the Bloke family. Actually, his wife is also a distant cousin of my beautiful wife. They're out in deepest, darkest France, and hopefully they're ready for us on the satellite link. So let's roll the titles. Ouais, mais tu sais, c'est anglais, c'est... Ouais, en tout cas, tu veux une clope? Ta gueule, salope, je suis chez moi, je fais ce que je veux. Si tu ne l'aimes pas, je te fous une claque, connasse. Oui, bienvenue mes petits choux-fleurs à Mecostan. Bon. Yes, I'm so sorry. Désolé. English. Yes. Please permit me to introduce myself. I'm Jean-Claude Mec, the cousin of the Bloke. My cousin anglais perfide thinks there is some kind of family resemblance, but I just don't see it myself. I do not look at all like that ugly fat roast beef, n'est-ce pas? Anyway, I brought with me here, sitting right beside me, my good friend Jean-François Jatapatique. He has brought with him a model 92 français revolver, 8mm French ordnance. I brought with me the substitute standard, the so-called 92 Espagnol, the Spanish model 92. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to Jean-François. Quoi? Mais quoi? Oh, zut. Oh, désolé. Pardon. Vas-y, mon gars.
As Jean-Claude said, we are showing you the revolver model 1892. It is not and never was a Lebel revolver. Nicolas Lebel had nothing to do with the design, and admittedly he may have shared a few absinthe and ladies with the Service Technique d'Artillerie who did develop it. The design of the revolver went through many stages. The critical requirement throughout was that it was 8mm because the barrels were rifled on the same machines as the Lebel rifle. Initial designs, they included a firing pin mounted on the frame. They included a rebounding hammer and the Abadi loading gate safety. In the end, only the Abadi safety was kept back, and of course the very, very modern swinging cylinder. Due to some very nasty letters on the LLF, Left-Handed Liberation Front, it was decided that the cylinder would drop to the right. Mais non, je déconne bien sûr. I'm kidding, of course. This was done for the cavalry so that they could draw fire with their left hand while keeping their saber in the right hand. Now, let us take a closer view. So, here is the revolver. It is very simple and very solid, not like those Tupperware of today. To load, it's very simple. You simply open it, swing out the cylinder, load, when you're finished, just like any modern revolver, eject. Now, lowering this gate, if you noticed, the hammer pushes back and it cannot go forward. Inside there is a cam which blocks any forward movement. If you put the cylinder back in and you pull the trigger, nothing happens. This rotates, which is very familiar to anyone with the Swiss 1882 revolver. You can also cock it and fire, but the hammer is still blocked by the cam. This means you cannot fire this revolver until the gate is closed. Comme ça. So, to take it apart, you simply unscrew this captive screw, which then allows you to swing out the frame. You remove the grip. And here we have the very, very simple mechanism. It is even helpfully labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you can assemble it and disassemble it as you like. Now, listen very carefully. I will do this only once. You have 1. Le grand ressort, the mainspring. Notice a very nice little roller there on the end. Then you have 2. Le chien, the hammer. 3. Le poussoir de barrière, the end. 4. The trigger. And that is it. Here you can see the cam that blocks the hammer. Okay, to reassemble you simply go backwards. Number 4, 3, 2, 1. There you go, so simple, even an officer could do it. And then you close everything up. Now, you will also notice, when I swing out the cylinder, there is a spring here. This spring pushes on the axis of the cylinder, and this is also a feature for cavalry because it means the cylinder does not bounce when you're trying to reload on the back of a moving horse. You see, they sort of everything. So, on the main markings, you have here Manufacture d'Armes Saint-Étienne, serial number, and you have model number and the date on the barrel. Now, some of these are also rebarreled, so it does not necessarily mean that the weapon is the same date as the barrel. The ammunition is 8mm 1892 French ordnance, or 8x27R, which is admittedly a weak ammunition, but perfectly adequate for clearing the trench of Bosch. But we will have more about that later. Now you will agree that these revolvers are très sexy, but there was a general shortage of guns, and we needed someone who could build them very quickly. And in the end, they bought them from Spain. Now, with a detailed study with Jean-Claude, we discovered that the negotiations went something like this. Des armes. Non. Ah, oui. Encore un.
Oh, hey, Monsieur Hombre, what you doing? You looking for guns?
Oui.
Why don't you come talk to us in Spain? We have nice little Ruby 32 pistols for you. We have finest Schmidt and Westons, any caliber you like, even your silly little 8mm. You want? No, stop!
So, this would be the perfect juncture to hand you back to Jean-Claude to show you his inferior Spanish thingy.
When they came back from Spain, they came back with these revolvers that look suspiciously like a Smith & Wesson M&P. And just to give you an idea of quite how similar they look to a Smith & Wesson M&P, I just happen to have one that I found down the back of the sofa. They are very suspicious. Now, at the time, the patent protection of Smith & Wesson and Colt did not extend to Spain. So there was a whole industry, mostly in the Eibar Valley, dedicated to making cheap copies of Smith & Wessons and Colts. And not only did the French go looking for revolvers there, but the perfidious English also went and bought 4.55 caliber break opens, copies of old 19th century Smith & Wessons, but they were of such poor quality that even the English would not tolerate them in combat, so they were relegated to training. Now, as you can see, this is just like any other Smith & Wesson. We have here a catch. The cylinder swings out on the correct side. The cylinder turns in the correct Smith & Wesson direction. The sights are like a Smith & Wesson. The ejector rod, it is all like very much like Smith & Wessons of its era. And here for comparison, we have a Smith & Wesson of the era. This is a hand ejector in the excessively large 4.55 caliber. I think the English were overcompensating for something there. Big holes down it. But even the shape of the end of the ejector rod is very, very similar. And from the outside, functioning, everything is very, very similar, as you can see. Now, unlike the French model 1892, these are not intended to be user-serviceable arms. There is no easy way to take the lockwork out, and in fact it comes apart very much like a Smith & Wesson. But we have to be very careful because the rumors about soft metal are entirely founded. Particularly the screws, they are very much made of monkey metal. Krupp steel, this is not. Now, just like a Smith & Wesson, you can take the cylinder out once that screw is out, and it comes out in exactly the same way. There you have it. Now, you get the side plate off again in exactly the same way. Ah, and it goes ping. That will please the bloke immensely. Mais c'est quoi ça? They are very different inside. Look, in the Smith & Wesson, you have classic Smith & Wesson trigger return slide, main spring down there, little spring in there, but in here, mon Dieu, sacré bleu, you have a V-spring, which we are not going to take out because it is a beast. The end of it is positioned by this little roll pin. Now, it has been alleged that this is rather much like a Colt. I just so happen to have found a Colt down the back of the sofa as well. So let us take this one apart and have a look. This is a privilege for you all because I've never taken this revolver apart before. I'd better not be mixing up all of these screws. It would be a little unfortunate. And yes, it is indeed a bit like a Colt on the inside. We have the trigger geometry, which is very similar. The Colt has a different cylinder stop. This cylinder stop is just like the Smith & Wesson. But here, the arrangement of the mainspring is about the same. Now, the mainspring, one end of the V, it hooks onto the hammer, just like the Colt there. The other end of the mainspring is turned through 90 degrees and pushes on the back of the trigger and also on a cam surface on the hand. So the same spring does three things. It is the hammer spring, the trigger spring, and it helps to cam the hand forward. Interesting, no? Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the material in the Spanish revolvers was made by and for monkeys. It is not very good, particularly the screws. But what they did in the engineering is they took that into account. If we look at the ratchet on the Smith & Wesson, here it is very, very dainty. On the Spanish revolver, it is much, much more robust. It is big and chunky and robust. Just like my beautiful wife, who I believe you may have seen earlier. This difference is also present in the hand, which is again big and chunky on the Spanish revolver, and is small and dainty on the Smith & Wesson. Now, as for the markings on these revolvers, really all you have along the top is the name of the maker, which in this case is Trocaola. I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce the rest of that. And then we have the serial number on the crane and on the bottom of the frame, and really very few other markings. There are a few random numbers somewhere that have nothing to do with the serial number. Another interesting difference with the Smith & Wesson is the hammer, which on the Smith & Wesson is cut from a single slab of steel.
whereas on the Spanish revolver, it is a cast part. It has a much wider thumb piece there, and the hammer nose is pivoted and is fit with a very difficult to see flush mounted pin, unlike the cheap and cheerful roll pin of the Smith & Wesson. But then this is probably a function of the materials. Now, I noticed in the comments of another video that someone criticized the Bloke for dry firing. Now, this is a revolver we don't dry fire because the parts are made of monkey metal, the hammer is cast, and the hammer, if it breaks, would be very difficult to replace. One other interesting point of note on the Spanish revolver is that it has a forcing cone like a clown's pocket. Here we have put a 38 special bullet backwards in the forcing cone. This is ridiculous. And just to show you how much more ridiculous it is, here is a 38 special. We can insert the 38 special, including part of the case, into the forcing cone. Now the advantage of this from a military perspective is that the timing of the revolver can go totally out of whack, the cylinder can be totally misaligned, and yet it will still fire safely and not spit lead and copper and nastiness out the side. Now, as for the munition, the ammunition, this is a hand-loaded one made from a trimmed and necked up 32-20. This is a dummy loaded with an H&N 95 grain bullet, which is a bit light. The originals were 120. For comparison avec a 38 Special and the vastly overcompensating 455 Mark II. Now, the original ammo came in 3 packets in the holster. And if I extract this packet here, we can tear it open and you can see ammo. Oh no, he didn't just rip open an original packet there. No, this is Jean-François's replica with some Fiocchis. Ha. Now, I'm very sorry, Fiocchi, but I must say that when I buy ammunition, I expect there to be powder in every cartridge, which is something that you have absolutely failed to do with this product here. And Jean-François and his hammer had to remedy this situation. Not good, guys.
Well, I guess that just about wraps it up for here. Santé, à la prochaine. Oh, they're done finally. Thank God for that. Thank you very much for that video, chaps. Hope you'll do another one again for us sometime. Santé, à la prochaine, and join us again sometime for another fascinating and exciting video on the Bloke on the Range. Allez, salut maintenant.